This week, a weather channel that was knocked off the air by a malicious attack, how bad bots are making up 20% of web traffic, ransomware is ravaging municipalities nationwide, a flaw in the Shopify API exposed revenue and traffic data for thousands of stores, and how attackers are weaponizing more vulnerabilities than ever before. In the expert commentary this week, we welcome Itai Tevet, the CEO of Intezer, to talk about Linux threats, the recent Mirai variants, and general code reuse in malware. All that and more on this episode of Hack Naked News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Welcome to Hack Naked News, episode 215 for April 23rd, 2019. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian. The Layer 8 conference has 2 tracks of talks on social engineering and open source intelligence gathering. The conference is the only one of its kind and will be held on Saturday, June 8th here in Providence, Rhode Island. Check out the Mental Health Hacker Village, the Tool Lockpick Village, and the CTF with Trace Labs. All that and more at layer8conference.com. Register for our upcoming webcast with ServiceNow by going to securityweekly.com/webcasts. Of course, if you missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them at securityweekly.com/on-demand. This week's webcast with ServiceNow will be about vulnerability prioritization and other such things. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you tune in. And now, the news for this week. The Weather Channel, not a weather channel, like the weather channel, I guess you could say, was knocked offline, off air, and is setting a dangerous precedent. The Weather Channel, a trusted cable source of meteorological data across the U.S., was knocked off the air by what it said was a malicious software attack on its network. They didn't say ransomware, but they said malicious attack. In any case, the Weather Channel hack, of course, not to be confused with its own Weather Channel hacks. I don't know if they employ hackers that are hacking into other weather channels. Anyway, it affected their live broadcast for about 90 minutes between 6 and 7:30 a.m., during which canned content was aired. The network resumed broadcasting from backup locations. Jeff Carson, the chief security scientist at Thycotic, weighed in on this article and says it will be interesting to see if this attack is related to the most recent string of malicious software or malware, rather, impacting other global organizations such as Locker Goga ransomware that impacted Norsk Hydro several weeks ago, causing more than $40 million in damages. Still, several systems are under manual control a week following the incident. Bad bots are making up about 20% of web traffic, according to our friends at Distill Network. Bots in general are estimated to make up actually roughly 37.9% of all internet traffic in 2018, as they analyzed the previous year. 1 in 5 website requests, or 20.4% of traffic, was generated by bad bots alone. According to Distill Network's the latest bot report, the Bad Bot Report 2019, the bot arms race continues. The financial sector is the main target, followed by ticketing, the education sector, government websites, and gambling. The most interesting part is how attackers are attempting, albeit lame, to use AI. A quote from the article says a total of 73.6% of bad bots are classified as advanced persistent bots, or APBs, which are able to cycle through random IP addresses, switch their digital identities, and mimic human behavior. As an example of this, mouse mimicry, in which the bot is able to simulate mouse events a genuine visitor might perform on a website domain. These attacks are used and try to appear as legitimate users for the purpose of ad fraud, as well as brute force attacks against online accounts, competitive data mining, transaction fraud, spam, and phishing campaigns. Sounds like scum and villainy to me. The Internet Explorer 0 Day lets hackers steal files from Windows PCs. Internet Explorer is dying just like Flash, and I will rejoice the day that I don't have to talk about Internet Explorer or Flash vulnerabilities. But I must press forward as a security researcher has published details of a proof of concept code for an Internet Explorer 0 Day that can allow hackers to steal files from Windows systems. I like how I say can allow, not could allow. That's how bad Internet Explorer is. The vulnerability resides in the way that Internet Explorer processes MHT files, which are MHTML web archives, and the default and standard which all IE browsers save web pages when a user hits the Control-S or Save Web Page command. A 2-year-old DNS hijacking campaign has targeted 40 firms globally. Now, not hijacked on the network, which would be really cool, and we've covered those before, but using phishing to gain access to your registrar to actually change the DNS servers that are hosting your website and redirect people. So the phishing emails were aimed at registrants and used to gain their credentials. From there, the bad actors could access the organization's DNS records with the registrant's credentials, or by exploiting, this is the other interesting thing, known vulnerabilities, including PHP code injection flaws and PHP myadmin. This is on your registrar site, not your site. So this is someone else's website that didn't or forgot to apply the patch, and now your website is owned. They're also using a remote code exploit from Cisco Integrated Service Router 2811, CVE 2017-6736, I should say, and the infamous Drupal get-in remote code execution flaw in Drupal, which is, of course, as we all know, CVE 2018-7600. Ransomware ravages municipalities nationwide this week. There's way too many big words in that. I hope I don't have to say that again. Augusta, Maine, Imperial County, California, Stewart, Florida, and Greenville, North Carolina. If you're in those municipalities, your state and or local government has suffered a ransomware attack. If you know about security, maybe you should help them. They were all in different stages of recovering from ransomware attacks. Over the last days, Augusta City operations were shut down after being hit with malware on April 18th. The city's IT department did not say ransomware was to blame, but the description of what took place has all the hallmarks of a ransomware attack, as many of them go after state and local governments because they're easy picking, and I think they have a higher likelihood of paying out the ransom due to basically not enough resources to recover from the attack. The city did say that malware gained entry to its network in an unknown fashion. That's helpful. And then methodically locked up endpoints and servers, like ransomware. The attack has affected the police dispatch system, the municipal financial systems, billing, automobile excise tax records, assessor's records, and general assistance. If you're in need of general assistance, you're out of luck because those systems have been infected with ransomware. A flaw in the Shopify API has exposed revenue and traffic data for thousands of online shops. API security is very poor today across so many applications, including Shopify. The white hat hacker who analyzed the APIs published over the past year by Shopify that allow users to fetch sales data for graph presentations. The hacker, he noticed that the system was leaking the revenue data of 2 unnamed Shopify stores, one of which had been removed from the platform. The researcher then carried out a mass check on all existing stores to determine if the platform was affected by a direct object reference issue iterating over the store name variable, and found that to be true. And so your revenue and traffic could be leaked out via Shopify's API. jQuery JavaScript library flaw opens the doors for attackers on hundreds of millions of websites. The vulnerability in the jQuery library, CVE 2019 11358, was discovered by researchers at Snyk, that's SNYK for those wondering, that also published proof of concept code for a prototype pollution attack. Now, I haven't dug into all the details. I think it's really cool that we're talking about a brand new web application attack. At least it's brand new to me. It's probably been around for a little while anyhow. But this is the first time I've seen this type of attack widely publicized. Snyk says that this security vulnerability referred to and manifests as the prototype pollution enables attackers to overwrite a JavaScript application object prototype, reads the analysis by Snyk. They say when that happens, properties are controlled by the attacker, can be injected into objects, and then either lead to denial of service by triggering JavaScript exceptions or tampering with the application source code to force the code path to that one where the attacker has injected code. Sounds pretty bad. Link is in the show notes. More research is required for that type. I'm excited about it. Well, I mean, I feel bad if you're vulnerable to it, but I'm still excited about it. Attackers are weaponizing more vulnerabilities than ever before. Some actionable results from this survey from RiskSense. They say over the period of research, the Adobe Reader family of products contained the most vulnerabilities, 1,338 to be precise. In 2015, was the year that the Adobe product was introduced. 137 vulnerabilities were reported. I recommend you just remove this software from all of your systems immediately, as there's several alternatives. Of course, most people won't go through that, but it has been proven that it is the most vulnerable piece of software, so why keep that on your systems? Also, despite a 31% decrease in vulnerabilities compared to the high reached in 2016, last year had the most weaponized vulnerabilities ever, 177, which represents a 139% increase compared to 2017. This means get patching and do it faster. Easier said than done, we know. Well, we'll take a short break and come back for expert commentary with the CEO of Intezer, Itai Tevet. Stay tuned. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Welcome back, everyone, to Hack Naked News. Quick announcement before we dig into this segment. Some of you have told us that you're overwhelmed by the amount of content that we distribute. In an attempt to make life a little easier for you, and find out what you're interested in, we've created a new list. If you go to securityweekly.com/subscribe, click the join the list button. That'll kick off our processes and project that we're working on to notify you when content that is of interest to you is published, and we'll send you a notification. How about that? The Layer 8 conference has 2 track talks on social engineering and open source intelligence gathering. It's a one of a kind. It will be held on Saturday, June 8th here in Providence, Rhode Island. They will have and feature the Mental Health Hackers Village, the tool Lockpick Village, a CTF with Trace Labs, and a whole lot more and you can find out more at layer8conference.com. For this segment, we welcome Itai Tevet. He's the CEO of Intezer to talk about Linux threats, Mirai variants, and some of the ways that they detect malware. I have to say, I mean, I'm not trying not to show favorites, but it's really cool. So, Itai, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Nice to have you today. When we were talking earlier, Itai, one of the things that I thought was very interesting and somewhat hilarious, as we actually have an open job position for a developer. So I've been trying to fill that role. I was a developer in a previous life and have kept up on it. And you told me, you said, malware, they tend to borrow code from other, strains of malware quite frequently. And I'm like, it sounds like the software that I write, which is really like 80% copied and pasted from Stack Overflow, and the rest of the 20% just me kind of making it do what I want to do, which doesn't always usually work out, although I am getting better. So attackers are doing the same thing.
Yeah, well, a malware is essentially just a software, right? It's just software with a malicious intent. But in the end, you are developing it through the same processes that you develop any other software. And this is why we see really the same phenomenon as we see in other legitimate software, which is a very vast code reuse. In code similarities, we see the same also in malware and in software threats.
And that's really interesting. And now one of the examples that we have of that is Mirai. And I tell you what, I've read through various software and decompiled versions of malware. I'm not an expert in malware reverse engineering or forensics. That's not. I know enough to get by and be dangerous. That's not my area of expertise. But when Mirai was released as, I don't know if it's open source license, right? But the source code's available for everyone to view. Reviewing the source code was really interesting to me. Now, I do have a background in some firmware reverse engineering and embedded device vulnerabilities, so it was particularly interesting to me to see how they constructed the code. But now, since it's out there, everyone's borrowing that code, right? I mean, we've seen how many different variants and different news articles that we've covered here in the show. It's like there's a new variant of Mirai running around because now it's open sourced.
Yeah, definitely. Mirai is, one very good example because the source code was leaked essentially, it's available publicly. We saw the same thing also with the Zeus malware, if you remember that a few years ago. So in the Zeus example, almost like every banking Trojan that we see online shares a bit of code with Zeus. Maybe it's a small function, or maybe it's like 50% of it. But even the newest hacking Trojans always share code with Zeus. It's quite amazing to see.
That's interesting, Itai. I wanted to ask you. So, is that because, like, when I reuse my own code, for example, right? It's usually because I've spent a pretty significant amount of time to get that one function down. It's gone through multiple iterations of testing. I maybe have used it in a couple of different projects over time and gotten it better and better, so that when I go do something new, I'm like, oh, I'm pulling that function's coming along with me on my new project. It sounds like Zeus had a similar kind of thing. They figured out how to do at least something really well, and so that code just carries forward.
Yeah, definitely. And think of the same scenario, but for an entire organization. Let's say like Microsoft, for example.
Right.
When they write a new version or even a new software, they can't, as an organization, write something from scratch, right? And this is the same thing that we see not in just the individual developers that use their own code, but also whole organizations or threat actors that have to reuse their own infrastructure that was already developed.
Yeah, usually it has comments in there like, don't change this code or everything breaks and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so now you're using this as an indicator to detect malware. I think that's really smart. And so what are some of the like percentages of code reuse across malware, Itai?
Well, it's extremely rare to see malware that doesn't share any kind of code with other malware, and some similarities can be very, very surprising, but it's almost every single piece of malware out there. But if you take a look on code similarities in general in malware, even if you have something that was written completely from scratch, but for a certain file, hey, I haven't seen this code anytime in the past. This is also suspicious by itself.
Yeah, that's true.
So this is why we believe in this approach of trying to figure out what are the origins of a certain file, not other methods of detection.
Now, some may say that you can obfuscate your code so that it's more difficult to analyze. When we were talking earlier, we were talking about Linux malware, Mirai being a Linux-ish. I mean, it's primarily targeting Linux embedded systems. When they write malware for Linux, they really don't take very many lengths to obfuscate the code at all. And I'm sure you've seen this and have wondered why that is as well.
Well, today they just don't need to. Unfortunately, the industry doesn't do such a good job today in detecting Linux malware. We see it in many different solutions and vendors, and that's why as an attacker, you would need to spend much more effort in doing some sort of evasive methods in Windows versus just launching a Linux attack, which might be much easier.
Yeah. It's interesting how the attackers seem to only do the minimum requirements, like the minimum amount of effort to really make their campaigns successful. Are you observing this trend as well?
Yeah, well, it's all about return of investment, right? You spend as low resources as you can to succeed in your goals. So it's the same case also with cyber attacks, obviously.
So tell us a little bit about, the approach and some of the results. Like, how does malware get analyzed through your system? What are some of the similarities that are most common in Windows or Linux malware?
Yeah, so just in general, saying, as I mentioned before, we tried in our system that is really targeted for malware analysis and malware detection, not to focus on the behavior of a file. So I'm sure you're familiar with so many sandboxes out there that try to monitor, API calls or some sort of behavior. We're trying to take a very different approach, which is basically detecting code similarities, as we mentioned before. And the way it works is that every file that is given to us for analysis in our system is broken down into thousands of small pieces of binary code. Usually it's around really hundreds or even thousands of these tiny pieces of code. And then we compare each and every one of them to our very large database that we call the global genome database, right? Mm-hmm. So really make this analogy to the genetic world. And in the end, you get this very simple report of, hey, what this software or file is composed of. Very similar, by the way, to the reports from 23andMe or Ancestry.com.
Right.
You get you're 20% French, 30% Chinese, and so on. So you get the same thing, but in the software world.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. It's interesting as I think about it. There are solutions that look at, I believe, like firmware from systems and are deconstructing it in the same way to look for vulnerabilities. But in your case, sounds like you took a similar approach but applied it to malware, which makes it's like I'm having this why didn't I think of that kind of moment. So that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
So now, if people are curious, Itai, like exactly how this works or how it fits in their workflow, like is it an agent? Is it sitting on the network? Like how does it fit into our workflow?
Yeah. So first of all, it was very important for us to create something that the entire community can use. So just, saying it up front, we have a free community edition that everybody can just upload files and scan for infections or for code similarities within your own files for free. But how an enterprise would use our product. So the idea is that you get so many alerts you need to investigate every day. It's one of the most well-known problems of the modern security operations. And each and every alert gets investigated with our system. So we try to automate this whole process of incident response and security operations, which is where I come from. This is really my own background running a CERT in the past.
Yeah, I can imagine that, if this is inside of an automated workflow, so as things are triggered as potentially malicious, they send it off to Intezer when it comes back. If it shares code with some other type of malware, it's like, the false positive rate has to be fairly low, if not zero, right?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the things I really like about what we do, although I'm biased, right? But so any kind of technique today is mostly based on some kind of anomaly detection, right? Or some kind of behavior analysis. And we take a very scientific approach to it. And as you said, like if we saw a piece of code that was only seen in a certain malware family, obviously it means that this is bad. Like it's very unlikely that it's an okay software.
Right. Yeah, that's really awesome. So any other thoughts about detecting malware in this way, or specific examples from Mirai or other pieces of malware?
Yeah, so we've just talked about Mirai beforehand. Just mentioning that today we see a very big increase in Linux threats due to the fact maybe that you have much more Linux machines. Like IoT and cloud, it's just taking over the world, which is great. But it possesses now a new threat. And with this increase of malware in the Linux space, we see like that almost every single new malware in that space shares code with Mirai. So it's really, really amazing to see. In addition, maybe an interesting example would be the new Flame version. If you do you remember that it was published just a few days ago? Yeah, I think it was in the SaaS conference of Kaspersky in Singapore. So we tried to analyze it with our system, and we saw many interesting similarities. You can see that it is sharing code with Stuxnet, with the first Flame version, with Dooku. So with many other threats that are associated to the same family of threat actors.
Yeah, that would be an indication to me if you told me, hey, there was some code running on one of my systems that shared code with Stuxnet and Dooku. Like, oh, that's bad. We need to stop everything and go respond to that incident, right?
Yeah, and really emphasizing that, you might be sharing code with Stuxnet and it might be fine, right? Because maybe you use the same library, right? But the thing is that once you have this database of tiny pieces of code and where you've already seen them before, you can distinguish between what is the code that was seen in many, many different places in the past and what is the code that was seen only in Stuxnet and only in Dooku, and so on and so forth. Right. So it's really about
developing those stronger indicators, right? We do one of our other sponsors, Domain Tools, does a similar thing with domains, right? And it's interesting because it's like the genealogy, like how closely related is this malicious domain to other domains that are known to be malicious. I think it's a great approach, and I encourage our listeners to check it out. There is a free version as well as an enterprise version. Our listeners can find out more at securityweekly.com/Intezer. That's INTEZR. securityweekly.com/Intezer. Please check it out. Itai, thank you so much for appearing on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Hack Naked News. We'll see you next time.